The brand new set Mega Evolution is here, and today we're going to be looking through loads of different early deck lists for you to get straight onto PTCG Live and start testing this brand new set. We've got deck lists for all of the new Mega Pokemon, we've got updated versions of the best decks in format, and we've got some fun Japanese lists too that have done well in the City Leagues. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Kicking things off then with some Omnipoke lists, we've got an updated Grimmsnarl list. Grimmsnarl gains a couple of cards, it gains the new Lily supporter, as well as the new Dangerous Ruins Stadium card. Overall, this deck is pretty similar, but it's been incredibly popular in the Japanese tournaments already. The increased consistency from Lily is just incredible, and those extra damage counters from the new stadium is very powerful, so definitely want to check out, especially when it looks like Gardevoir is going to be a very popular archetype. This is a clear winner from this set, so a good one to start off your testing on PTCG Live with. Onto another Omnipoke favourite then, this is Blaziken Zoroark. We saw Blaziken do well with Dragapult in the recent Frankfurt Regionals. This is actually paired with Zoroark, similar to how Joe played it in the NAIC tournament, but we also have Mega Absol EX in this deck right now. Means that you can sometimes be able to take some cheap KOs with its Doom Period attack. You can attach and set this up quite quickly, which is nice. Also, the deck is just another one that gets a buff from having access to Lily to make it more consistent. And again, is a bit of a rogue archetype. It lets you use some of these underutilized cards, things like Reshiram EX as well, which is pretty nice. You're just basically trying to cover some very important type coverages right now. You've got the Fire type for the Gholdengos and all of the new Grass type Pokemon. And then you've got the Zoroark package and the Absol in here to cover the Dark Weak stuff like Gardevoir. So definitely an upgrade to the previous Blaziken builds and potentially one to revisit with this new set. Onto an updated version of Ceruledge then with a brand new draw engine LunaRoc. You're going to see this draw engine in a few different decks right now. I'm really excited about trying this out. Lunatone letting you draw more cards and Zoroark being an early game attacker are two things that Ceruledge desperately wants. And being able to increase your consistency as well by adding in things like the Fighting Gong means that hopefully in your early game you can be drawing through the deck whilst taking some cheap prizes with Zoroark, and quickly accelerating towards the late game when then Ceruledge is just one-shotting everything in its path. It's been a while since we've seen Ceruledge do well, so I'm really interested to see whether this buff to the archetype with a brand new draw engine is going to mean this is actually a competitor in the format going forward. Onto our first fully Mega list then, and this is Mega Manectric Magneton. This is focused a little bit more about really leaning into the high HP 3-prize nature of Mega Manectric. You typically want to be using 2 of Magneton's ability to set up 2 Mega Manectrics, and then just try and force your opponent to take 8 prizes. We've also got an Iron Hands in here, as well as 2 of the new Acerolas Mischief card to try and force an additional turn out of your opponent, as well as having to make them go through 8 prizes, to just essentially make it as difficult as possible for them to win the game, whilst you continually use Riot Blaster to deal 200 plus every single turn. With this build, you can also really easily become like a walling deck with the Mega Manectric's first attack. So there's still a lot of different options to this deck, even though there's less natural options than a Miraidon style build. So definitely an interesting one to try out. A cool way of playing Mega Manectric that may not be a traditional way of building it. On to one of the best decks in the format right now then. This is Gholdengo. There's actually no new cards in this list right now. This is just our updated Gholdengo list for trying to grind the ladder as quickly as possible. If maybe you're waiting for the dust to settle, or you're really trying to take advantage of all of these new 3-prize Pokemon in the format, where Gholdengo is going to actually be able to hit them for weakness sometimes, or even just one-shot them by discarding a load of energy. This is our updated Gholdengo list to try and do that as consistently as possible to get you grinding and climbing up that ladder straight to the Arceus ranks. Similarly, we've got another top contender from this format right here. This is Dragapult Dusknoir. As you can see, one of the biggest upgrades to this deck is just the 4 Lily's Determination supporter. This makes this deck incredibly consistent. It's so powerful, and it's really consistent at getting these very strong setups in the early game. Naturally, it's kind of a combo deck as well, so having access to more cards with your supporter card means that you can draw into your Dusknoir combos, draw into your Dracloaks much more consistently, and start being this really oppressive deck that we know Dragapult Dusknoir is. Obviously, we have to be aware that Psyduck is in the format, and obviously none of our lists so far have shown Psyduck, but there will be people that put Psyduck in to try and put a stop to Dusclops and Dusknoir's abilities. So just keep that in mind when you're laddering, but we still think this is going to be a very powerful archetype going into this format, and not many decks will be able to utilize Psyduck to kind of push this out of the metagame. It's still going to be a very strong archetype. Next up, we've got another LunaRoc deck. We've got Ethan's Typhlosion with a LunaRoc engine. We've actually tested this a little bit already in person, and this was really impressive, just giving you some additional draw as well as some early game attacking options so that you're not having to feed the opponent single price Cyndaquils, Quilavas and stuff like that. You can happily just give them the Soul Rocks in the first couple of turns of the game, whilst also setting up some damage or even taking some early prizes yourself. That means you can lean into the Ethan's Typhlosion in the late game where you're going to be one-shotting things, and just in general makes your late game much more consistent because you don't have to rely as much on recovery and getting those pieces back to be able to chain attacks every turn. This is definitely going to be a deck I try out a lot in the early format for Mega Revolution. I've always been a fan of Ethan's Typhlosion as an archetype, and I think Zoroark Lunatone is a really nice upgrade to the engine, as well as just being another way of increasing its consistency. I think it actually will help it be aggressive against some of these other one-prize archetypes as well. So yeah, definitely a fun one to try out, and one that I'm going to be jumping into the ladder with myself quite early on. Another LunaRoc deck here. This is LunaRoc Raging Bolt. This is basically moving away from the knockdown engine and trying to go back to a more draw-heavy engine, but instead of using lots of 2-prize Pokemon, you also have some 1-prize outs in there to be able to also potentially have some early game 1-prize attackers to be able to, I guess, take some early prizes against some smaller things whilst you set up for big Raging Bolt KOs later on. The energy count's a little bit different here just to increase the amount of energy we have for Lunar Cycle, but it's going to be really interesting to see whether this kind of build can overtake the Owls build, or whether the Owls build will still be the far superior build when it comes to trying to play an aggressive Raging Bolt style archetype. Onto another mega deck. This is Quad Kangaskhan. Quad Kanga is really trying to lean into the bulk of Kangaskhan. You've got 3 Bravery Charms in here, you've got the Buffalance in here, you've got Pennies for trying to pick up your Kangaskhan's after they've taken a hit, you've got Scramble Switch to try and move your Kangaskhan's around, to really try and force your opponent to boss around your Kangaskhan's as well. This is just designed to be as big and bulky as Wally as possible. It's not got the flexibility of some of the other Kangaskhan lists, like the Owls build and things like that, but I do think there's potentially room for a tanking archetype here, and just having a 300 HP basic that also has some draw power as well is pretty impressive. I think Kangaskhan is a very under-the-radar card, so definitely want to try out this quad build, just trying to be as annoying as possible rather than trying to lean into some of the consistency of being able to be a colourless type. Another fun one here, this is Mega Latias Ho-Oh. This is a really, really interesting archetype, trying to lean into, one, being able to use Ho-Oh to attach some energy and cycle around with Latios' ability to attack with Latias every turn. But also you can do a huge amount of damage on the first turn of the game, especially if you're going second with all the different poison modification, plus the base 40 that you have from Latias' strafe attack. You can strafe, poison your opponent, and then go into a Pecha and deal up to about 160 damage in a single hit, which is just crazy. There's going to be games that you can steal from opponents like this. It's going to be potentially on the ladder just trying to rank up and get to Arceus quickly. We've seen lots of these like poison donk decks that sometimes people play just to get to Arceus as quickly as possible. This could be a brand new iteration of this, but has a bit more firepower in the mid to late game as well, being able to use the Illusory Impulse attack. And yeah, this one's a little bit scared of all the psychic types that are going to be running around with Lily's Clefairy and stuff. Obviously, giving 3 prizes away on a basic Pokemon that is weak to psychic is a bit scary, but there might be opportunities for you to bob and weave and try and dodge the Gardevoir decks, as well as rank up quickly trying to poison donk your opponents with the Pecha Brute Bonnet combo. Next up, we've got an updated Archaludon list. This is making use of the new Mega Mawile EX. It's only a one-of, but I really think it improves the deck's late game because Archaludon naturally caps itself at 220 damage. Mega Mawile can easily go above that, so in the late game you can try and basically take your last 2 prizes on something that's far bigger than Archaludon would usually be able to take advantage of, meaning that your Archaludons in the early game can be targeting things like Fez and Mew and Squawkabilly to still give you a clear path to trying to win the game. You could easily jam in the Lily supporter card into this deck as well, just to make it a bit more consistent. But we've tried to keep this shell as familiar as possible to the Archaludon Zoroark decks that saw some play a few months ago. It was never the strongest archetype, but it does at least give you a good foundation for how to build this archetype going forward. And like I say, Mawile is just a straight up upgrade into this deck's late game, so could be a nice way of trying to close out games which Archaludon may have normally struggled with. Onto another aggressive archetype then. This is a Hop Zacian deck, but it also makes use of the Mega Absol card. Hop Zacian really trying to bully some of these evolving basic Pokemon out of the format, whilst also potentially setting up the bench Pokemon for Absol's Doom Period attack to take some instant KOs on some bigger Pokemon that normally this deck would struggle with. There's lots of different win cons here. You've got the Monkey Dory package, you've got Devolution, you've got just straight up damage from things like Cramorant doing a huge amount of damage with all the different damage modifiers that this deck plays. And again, you've got things like Iron Valiant to take some cheap early KOs alongside Hop Zacian as well. So this could be another one to try and rank up early with the deck and get to that Arceus tier as quickly as possible to then start testing some of the archetypes that you may end up taking to regionals instead of this. We've got another Mega Manectric deck here. This is a bit more traditional. This is built more around Miraidon, just using Mega Manectric as an alternative attacker. We've got Electric here as our energy acceleration rather than the Magneton. And then we're subbing out the Zekrom EX for a Mega Manectric approach instead. Obviously, this is an evolution and gives up an additional prize card, but can reach the high numbers of Zekrom EX's damage output quicker than Zekrom can, and has a bit more variable damage output when you don't necessarily always need to be doing the huge amount of damage that is available to Mega Manectric. I played Miraidon to the last Regionals Championships that I played. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to be giving this one a go. I'm not entirely convinced that Mega Manectric is the right way to play Miraidon going forward, but it's definitely something I want to try out, just because I think the flexibility of Mega Manectric alone is pretty impressive. Here's another wacky one as well. This is Mega Camerupt. This is our Mega Camerupt build. As you can see, the energy count in this deck is insane. There's all sorts going on. We've got Jet Energies, we've got Luminous Energies, we've got Reversal Energies, we've even got Ignition Energies and Legacy Energy. So there's lots going on here. The idea is you're really able to lean into Mega Camerupt's bulk with things like the 1 energy attachment plus Wally. We're trying to move around a lot with things like Switch, Jet Energy, and the double Latias to get Volcanion into the active, burning the opponent, and then switching back into the Mega Camerupt to deal a huge amount of damage with its first attack. We have the Baby Camerupt as a potential uptrading option alongside the Reversal Energy. We've got the Ignition Energy to be able to deal a much larger amount of damage alongside the Burn and Monkey Dory, which can easily be KOing even Mega Pokemon. And we've got a really solid Draw Engine and the Dunsparce Hilda combo. And you could even replace the Legacy Energy with an Enriching Energy if you wanted to really lean into the amount of cards you can draw with this deck. I by no means think this is going to be revolutionary. I don't think it's going to be breaking the top tiers of the meta. But I do think this is a really fun one to try out, and definitely will have some highlight reel moments on live when it comes out, I think. Onto our updated Mega Venusaur deck then. This is one that I'm also really excited to try out. Mega Venusaur has really intrigued me basically ever since it was announced how you can build around the trapping element of Bulbasaur, how you can build around Crustle, but also we've now got some additional options and things like Hawlucha and Durant to try and have other win conditions in the deck. After a few turns of trapping, you can use something like Hawlucha to take some cheap, easy prizes, or you can try and run your opponent out of cards a little bit quicker with Durant when they're potentially not expecting it, alongside Professor Churro's Scenario to be able to get like a double discard or something like that. We've definitely made some improvements from our initial 60 that we showed on the channel, and I'm really excited to try out this new 60 with a couple of new win conditions to see whether Mega Venusaur can actually be this big tanky disruptive Pokemon in the format, or whether it's still just going to be relegated to a bit of a meme tier because it's not going to quite be good enough. I'm really hopeful, and we're going to show off another Mega Venusaur list later, which is a bit more aggressive, that has seen some success in Japan. But I'm really hopeful this defensive version of Venusaur is one that we can try and lean into and potentially be a thorn in the side of a few decks in the format. So I think one of the biggest upgrades to any deck in this format is going to be the brand new Garchomp lists. Cynthia's Garchomp gains a lot of consistency with the existence of the Fighting Gong and Lily's Determination, as well as a lot of potential damage output from the new Premium Power Pro. I think by far this deck is probably one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Mega Revolution set. This deck is like really, really low tier right now. It's seen a little bit of success here and there, but it's by no means like a top tier archetype. But I actually think this could be a real threat in the metagame. Just from the raw damage this deck can put out, it's actually really, really scary. This is an updated list from the one on the channel you saw at the end of the video that we posted a few weeks ago. And I think I'm really impressed in how this looks so far. I'm going to be trying this out quite a lot for the regionals that are coming up at the end of October in Europe. I think this looks like a Stage 2 deck that potentially doesn't tie as much as some of the other Stage 2 decks because of how aggressive it can be, but also just one TM evolution, getting a Gabite or two into play. The deck basically feels like it's unstoppable once it starts chaining its attacks back and forth. So one that I definitely recommend you try out. I think it's probably the biggest winner of the like low tier decks from this new set. I actually think this has a lot of potential. And I'm really interested to see whether it actually does like meet the potential that I think this has, or whether it still ends up flopping even with all of these boosts to the deck's consistency and damage output. One of the decks that I think Job is going to be putting a lot of time into is this new Mega Lucario Zoroark deck. You've seen a video on the channel about it. This is definitely a bit of a pet deck for us. We're very intrigued as to whether there's something here, whether the combination of Zoroark and Mega Lucario can cover enough of the different bases in the format to potentially be like this solid archetype, very similar to something like Zoroark from back in the day. In our early testing, it felt like there was a lot going on and you really had to have a lot of the puzzle pieces together at the right time. So we've trimmed it back with this updated list and tried to be a little bit more consistent in getting that game plan going more consistently. And I really think Joe's going to be putting a lot of time into this one to try and unlock its potential if there is any there. I'm hoping there is. I think Mega Lucario is a very, very powerful card in a vacuum, and I've really been enjoying playing and seeing Zoroark's success lately anyway, so I think this is naturally a pretty good combination of cards here, and I'm hopeful that there's more than just... there's more than nothing here. There's an actual archetype under the surface here that we can potentially play to a regional finish. Next up then, we've got our other Mega Kangaskhan list. This is more similar to the Terrapagos Noctowl decks that we used to see play back when Stellar Crown first released. But instead of just leaning into Terrapagos, this also has the Mega Kangaskhan as an attacker as well as a way of just drawing an additional couple of cards. Now, we've seen lists like this do well post rotation. There was a couple of changes that Terrapagos had to make. And this was kind of the direction Terrapagos took, leaning into Lily's Clefairy and Monkey Dory, as well as Cornerstone Ogerpon. And because Mega Kangaskhan is a colourless Pokemon, you can easily slot this in and potentially have this archetype being powerful once again, because you've now got a lot more bulk on your side, having an additional plus 70 HP on top of Terrapagos' 230 anyway, with Mega Kangaskhan, plus Bravery Charms and Buffalance and stuff like that. You've potentially got like a Terrapagos deck, but almost on steroids with how much HP you've got. It's really difficult to actually one-shot this thing. You're still a bit of a type coverage box. You're trying to hit a couple of other things for weakness as well, particularly anything that's psychic weak, as well as having outs to some of these other decks like Gholdengo, which normally would be a bit of an issue for you. We have the Cornerstone Ogerpon to try and stop them from just setting up in your face and then just rolling through you as well. I was actually really impressed with this deck when we first tried it, and definitely I think one Joe is going to end up exploring, and potentially one that I will end up exploring as well, just because I've had some experience with Terrapagos too. And I think I'd prefer this build a little bit more to the quad build, because there's a little bit more flexibility to it. Whilst you do have a lot more options, you do have to cherry pick those specific cards that you need. But you do have a little more draw power than Terrapagos used to have because of the run errand ability on Mega Kangaskhan, so it can help smooth things out as well. So yeah, definitely a really interesting archetype, and one that I'm looking forward to giving it another go to see if it has another lease of life or not. Now this is a meme one. This is Mega Abomasnow, an archetype that I think is nothing more than a meme tier archetype, but for sure one that I'm going to have a couple of games with. Just because any deck that gets to play 25 water energy is going to be at least a little bit fun. Discarding the top 6 and dealing 100 for each water energy you discard, there's going to be some great highlight reel moments from that. It's a shame we haven't really had too much time to test this. This isn't going to be particularly powerful, but I do think it will be a lot of fun. So yeah, give this one a go if you're just looking to chill out and play something fun with the brand new Megas. Onto a more traditional Raging Bolt here. This is back to the Noctowl engine. There actually isn't any new cards from this deck, so this is just another updated list for, I guess, grinding and trying to get to Arceus tier as quickly as possible. No new cards needed for this one. You can quite easily just play this if you've already got all the cards for it. No need to open any Mega Evolution packs. So yeah, could be a good one just for grinding in the early few days while you try and work out exactly what Mega Evolution cards you want to craft and pull from your packs. An updated version of Charizard here. You can see the Psyduck is one of the biggest upgrades here. I think this is probably the deck that benefits from Psyduck the most, just being able to stop your Dragapult opponents trying to bully your board completely with their Dusknoirs. But also, it's definitely another deck that really appreciates having a couple of Lilies in the deck. Having some additional good early game supporters alongside the 4 Arven you play, I think is really, really beneficial for this deck. I was super close to playing Charizard for Frankfurt Regionals, and I think this might be enough of a buff for me to reconsider it for the next couple of weeks to see whether it now can compete with Dragapult with the addition of Psyduck, as well as staying consistent and being able to fight the other Stage 2 decks, whilst also having a game plan into some of the other more aggressive decks in the format like Raging Bolt. Zoroark is another card that has seen massive success recently, obviously did very well at the World Championships, but also most recently won the Pittsburgh Regionals last weekend. And I think there's no reason that Zoroark doesn't still look pretty powerful going into this format, especially given that Gardevoir gets some great buffs. This list actually is only using a couple of new cards. It's just 2 Lily in this deck. But I think this deck really will appreciate having an additional couple of draw supporters to try and draw as many Zoroark as early as possible to start getting your trade engine online and starting to pull together these powerful combo turns, whether it's through things like Iono plus gusting something or churing some damage away. All of this good stuff is going to be really important, and I think Lily is going to make that a lot more consistent to get out and go. Where sometimes you've really had to lean into Arven and evolving into these Zoroark before you start getting your draw engine. You at least have some very, very powerful draw supporters now that aren't discarding some of these combo pieces that you're often trying to protect. They're shuffling the back in to try and get you to your Zoroark to then be able to utilize those combo pieces towards the late game. And then finally for Omnipoke lists, we do have our updated Mega Gardevoir list. Still pretty similar to the one on the channel, just playing one Mega Gardevoir and leaning into the Mystery Garden instead of the Artisan Stadium card. I still think this archetype is going to be fantastic. There's absolutely no reason I think this archetype is going anywhere. And it's still going to be a very, very powerful one going into the new format. The buffs from Lily is just insane. It's going to make it even more consistent at actually getting those powerful early game turns. I think there's going to be more and more situations where you see multiple Munkidori on the board. And now you have a really tanky Pokemon in Mega Gardevoir that can just feasibly take 4 prizes against certain archetypes. I think there's definitely going to be situations where this archetype now actually can race things a lot better than it has been able to before as well. So Gardevoir's not going anywhere. To many people's disappointment, it's still going to be very powerful. And this is the best list, we think, for trying to make use of the new cards, with the updates to the Ralts and the Curlier, as well as leaning into the new Mega Gardevoir EX2. On some successful City League Japanese lists then, this is a straight Dragapult list that's trying to use some new cards. We've got the Psyduck in here to protect you from other Dragapult Dusknoir decks, as well as any other deck playing Dusknoir. We've got 4 of the new Lily's Determination to try as be as consistent as possible, but also we've got one of the new Shuckle to try and heal out some of the additional damage your opponent's going to try and throw over with things like Munkidori, as well as any other sprinkling other Dragapult archetypes are going to try and do against you. Obviously, sometimes you'll have to attach your Luminous Energy to things that you may not want to attach them to if you're having to try and protect them from damage counters placement, but it can be nice for getting a little bit of healing on your Dragapults and your Munkidoris to try and help them survive a little bit longer against some of these archetypes that like to damage the bench. I'm still not convinced whether Dragapult Dusknoir is just better than straight Dragapult. I haven't played with Dragapult without Dusknoir enough, but I think the plethora of different options, the Cornerstone Mask Ogopon, the Sudowoodo, all of these different options are going to give Dragapult lots of different win conditions that maybe Dusknoir doesn't always have. Dusknoir's a little bit more linear in trying to just take out the opponent's board as quickly as possible. And also there's potentially a reason to not play Dusknoir anymore just because of the existence of Psyduck anyway, so definitely maybe a time to try out Dusknoir-less Dragapult to see whether just leaning into the Dragapult's attack is still good enough to win some tournaments. Onto an updated Ho-Oh Armarouge deck then, where we've got a few different Mega Pokemon in here. We've got all the standards, we've got the Durant, we've got the Reshiram, we've got the Wellspring, we've got the Iron Hands, we've got the Lily's Clefairy to try and cover all of these different type coverages. But also we now have things like Mega Kangaskhan for an additional bit of support. We've got Mega Absol to potentially be able to just one-shot something that you've already been able to set up with a previous attack, or just trying to have a big swinging Dark-type Pokemon into all of these Gardevoir decks. And we've got a couple of Lily's Determination to help the early game supporters alongside the Carmines and Researchers, because sometimes Research can be discarding cards that you really don't want to be discarding, particularly those things like Prism Energy and stuff like that. Sometimes you'll want to shuffle those back into the deck with the use of Lily instead. Definitely still a type coverage box, but one that will be hitting pretty much everything for weakness right now, so there shouldn't be a matchup that you're not able to try and take advantage of with this deck. Now, if you're a Crustle believer, there's an updated Crustle list here for you. I think this is another deck that actually gets a real buff from Lily's Determination. It often doesn't take particularly quick prizes. It's typically quite slow at taking prizes, so you're often going to get full value out of Lily, and it can help you try and get into your Dwebbles and your energy to evolve into Crustle to get to the annoying Mysterious Rock in ability as quickly as possible. The deck also now has access to Psyduck, so any decks that do play Dusknoir that are going to try and like double Dusknoir you for a KO, you now have access to Psyduck. Obviously, there are ways of being able to deal with Psyduck, and there will be situations where you're not able to bench it because you have to really put up like a wall, a fort of just Crustles. But I think there will be situations where your opponent is really playing into trying to win the game with Dusknoir, where a single Psyduck will pretty much shut down that game plan, and they're going to have to start spending resources to try and KO the Psyduck instead, and potentially you can just then recycle it on the following turn and still prevent their Dusknoirs from actually dealing damage to your Crustles. These decks aren't for everybody, but some people really enjoy these types of decks, so wanted to show off an updated list for if you're a Crustle believer and want to see how the new Mega Evolution set can improve your deck even more. On the other side of the coin completely, this is a Turbo Dusknoir deck that came something like top 4 or top 8 at one of the City Leagues, which isn't a huge achievement, but is a pretty interesting archetype nonetheless. The idea is you sit behind a Budgie whilst just building up your Dusclops and Dusknoirs to be able to pepper as many damage counters onto your opponent's board as possible, whilst then being able to close the game out with something like a Blood Moon Ursaluna, along with counter catchers, all that good stuff to try and be as annoying as possible. These types of decks never do crazy well in regional tournaments, but can be quite fun to play online, especially if your opponent hasn't really had much experience playing against them. There can be turns where you just randomly lose all of your board because your opponent gets like double, maybe even triple Dusknoir out in a single turn and just deals lots of damage to your board, and you end up just losing the game in a single turn. So yeah, never a deck that's going to be winning a regional championship, but could be a fun one to ladder with nonetheless. Now, I mentioned earlier on we're going to be showing off another Mega Venusaur deck. This is a much more aggressive variant. This is playing 4 of the Teal Mask Ogerpon to attach as many energy onto your board as possible, as quickly as possible, as well as getting some additional draw out of them. But it's also leaning into the new Meganium to double up all of the grass energy you attach to be able to use Mega Venusaur, as well as Teal Mask as very, very powerful, potentially cheap attackers. The amount of damage Teal Mask Ogerpon can do with just 3 energy is crazy, and you end up being able to attack with something like a Mega Venusaur for just 2 energy, which can be a little bit more easy to do compared to the defensive list we showed off earlier on. The defensive list hasn't really seen any success in Japan. There's been a few successful versions of this deck. So this could be the way to play Mega Venusaur instead of building around the defensive Bulbasaur binding with Relicanth kind of archetype. I'm still going to be trying to trap my opponents, but it might just be that this is actually an aggressive deck all along and you're just trying to build up some crazy high damage with Teal Mask Ogerpon's Myriad Leaf Shower, alongside things like Mega Venusaur and Meganium for when the time is right. For the mill lovers out there, LunaRoc is a great upgrade to the Great Tusk deck. It's a brand new draw engine that helps you get the energy into the bin for your Sardas, whilst also drawing some additional cards to get you towards your ancient supporters, whilst also giving you an early game attacker should your opponent be trying to play as little Pokemon as possible and trying to just be a deck that plays one Pokemon and doesn't like play all of their cards down. It actually gives you an option for being able to attack with the Zoroark quite quickly as well as introducing an attacking option in Zoroark. If your opponent's trying to just go lone Pokemon against you, you can use Zoroark to try and chip away at them and force them to play cards. You've got the Fighting Gong in here to make this deck even more consistent, to be able to search out the Great Tusks. And you've got Psyduck in here to not be completely bullied by all of the Dusknoirs out there right now, particularly from the Dragapult players that are going to try and take multiple prizes off of you at once and leave you without a Great Tusk on board. It's been a while since we've seen a mill deck be super successful, so it's going to be interesting to see whether the LunaRoc engine actually pushes this to being a relevant archetype or not. Typically, the mill decks that have a draw engine are much better than the mill decks that don't, so it could be that this is all the deck needed to be able to become at least a C or a B tier archetype. On to Eevees then, another type coverage box deck. You've got the Flareon in here for Gholdengo plus all the new grass types. You've got Leafeon in here to cover all the dark types. You've got Sylveon in here to cover everything that's weak to Psychic. And then you've still got Wellspring in here to try and bully some of the evolution-based decks too. It's another deck that I think really enjoys playing Lily. It's an archetype that doesn't usually get a lot of draw power. You often have to shoot out cards with Noctowl. So randomly being able to find turns where you can have a big burst of draw support is very, very powerful for then using those Noctowls later on to weave together the combos that the Lily has set up for you. Another heavy combo deck is Terrabox. We've seen this have a real resurgence in play recently. And this list actually only plays one new card, it's just one Lily. But again, it's another deck that really benefits from having a lot of combo pieces in hand. So if you find a turn where you can weave a Lily into play, you can then try and use your Noctowls to piece together the combos that you miss and try and find those key attackers that are really important for trying to hit for specific weaknesses or anything like that. This deck still feels like it's got a very, very high power ceiling. I still think it's quite difficult to use, but we've seen it's been very successful in the previous format, and I think there's absolutely no reason it can't be as successful in this new format too. If you want to shove the LunaRoc engine in something else, you could always play it in Gholdengo. It's actually seen a lot of success in Japan as a new way of playing Gholdengo with a decent draw engine. The amount of cards you can draw is actually absurd with the 3 additional cards from LunaRoc plus all of the coin bonuses you get. You actually end up drawing through your deck very, very quickly, trying to draw towards those superiors and things like that. Now, obviously, this deck isn't playing any of the prize cheese stuff that some Gholdengo decks are playing right now, and leans into a different ace spec instead of the Energy Search Pro, but does have a lot of search and support and consistency from being able to play the gongs, which can also serve as 50 damage mods as well. So definitely a cool way of playing Gholdengo, and could even be better than the Energy Search Pro build we've seen recently too. And finally then an updated version of the Joltik Gholdengo deck that kind of spawned out of the World Championships. Nothing new here in terms of new cards, just an updated list if you want to try and use this to grind some quick games on the ladder. These games are always very, very quick. You're typically taking 1 turn to set up the Joltik and then just 3 attacks to try and take 6 prizes in 3 turns. So typically pretty quick to play these games, and because of that, could be a good one for trying to rank up to Arceus tier as quickly as possible. And that's it. That's plenty of lists for you to hopefully be jumping into PTCG Live with on release day and over the next few weeks whilst we wait for the cards to be legal in the official tournaments. Let us know down below if there's any decks we missed, if there's anything that you're really excited about playing that we haven't talked about, or whether there's any of the lists that you would slightly adjust, especially if you've been able to test in the new format already. As always, make sure you stay tuned to the channel for lots of Mega Evolution content. We've got lots of exciting videos coming up. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe, and look forward to seeing you guys in another video tomorrow.